morning and welcome to you all. I'm so pleased to see so many of you here this morning. Welcome to our elected officials, our business and our civic leaders, all you service providers and community members. I want to give a shout out and a special thanks to the Chamber's staff, especially Colleen Pate and her team for providing the platform and the interface for the summit today. I want to thank ECHO and the city staff for all the work that has happened in this past 6 weeks, and to all of you and your organizations for supporting the work of the summit. Each of you have provided inspiration, input, knowledge, and some of you have provided your lived experience. And I'm so impressed with your willingness to join and to commit to this community leadership coalition on homelessness. I know some of you work in direct service, in policy, in education. You've dedicated your lives to this work for decades. And some others of us have come to this work more recently. But what I know is that we're all focused on finding dignified housing for those in our community who are living on our streets, addressing and reducing unsheltered homelessness in Austin. Last month at the first plenary session, we centered our work on the history of racism in the broader world, but here in Austin specifically. We'll continue to use this lens to drive towards equity in everything that we do. 40% almost of those experiencing homelessness are Black, and almost 60% are people of color. Equity lens will be part of our work. The leadership group last month set a vision and a goal for this summit. In the short term, transitioning 3,000 people out of unsheltered homelessness in 3 years. And in the long term, we'll be driving towards equilibrium. In 5 years is what our target is today. And we'll do that work through a system that supports the complete journey from tents to dignified housing. We're committed to a number of principles in our work and our quest here. We want to build a robust infrastructure that supports the complete human journey from dignified housing, but also including mental health, healthcare, job training, and other wraparound services that will lift people up off the streets. We're going to leverage the established agencies and resources that are already in place and doing very good work. We're not reinventing the wheel, and where we have good practices in place already, we are going to support those practices. We are going to organize and responsibly manage the human and financial resources, and we will track the data needed to deliver breakthrough results. But we are very clear we do not want to waste one precious resource. We are committed to creating an effective governance approach to ensure that proper short and long-term investments and efforts are being managed. We're going to monitor the progress, and we're going to course correct as needed. Most importantly, we have come together through the summit as a community. We're brought together the best and the most capable experts, the resources. We want to launch this system of transformation in our community. It's a complex problem, but we have accessed the best expertise and the most successful practices from across the country and here in our community. Our facilitator, Mandy Semple, has grounded us in the systems approach. And by using input from the current data, interventions, the affinity group work, previous plans, and reports that have been compiled in Austin from over the last several years. Today, we're going to see a model of how to get us to these very ambitious goals. Our runner show today, we'll hear from Mandy first, about the model that she has put together with the help of many in our community. You'll have an opportunity to ask questions, and our panel from the leadership team will be answering your questions in real time. The way you can do this is to put your questions in the chat. Laura Huffman from the Austin Chamber will be monitoring that panel. I want to set your expectations. What you see today is not slick and it's not complete. We have a lot of work still to do, but we really wanted you to see where we are, what we know, and where we are headed to resolve the immediate human need in our community. We must begin. We need to stop talking, but we must begin well, and we must iterate. We must seize this moment. We have the focus of all of our community right now on unsheltered homelessness. We have some monies available, and we will see money flow into the city and the county from federal funds. That will be happening very, very soon. And these funds will help us build out a system to resolve homelessness for those on our streets. Our community responsibility is to build out a system and to find additional investments to resolve for homelessness. And so we begin, not perfectly, but we will begin today. Mandy, can you please share your model with our community?
Thank you, Lynn. Let me open my slide deck. So I am so excited to be here today. This is an incredible moment. We've been on a journey together, and it's the very beginning of what I imagine is going to be a tough road ahead for this community, but a really worthy effort to dramatically transform your community and the lives of so many living in it. So I want to remind us of what brought us to this moment today. We've been participating in a summit, virtual, given where we are in this moment in our evolution, which has definitely added challenges, but it in many ways also exemplifies the commitment of this community, even when it's hard, to do the work and to move us forward. The objectives of the summit have been to create a unified vision for equitably addressing unsheltered homelessness, to generate an investment plan and aligned implementation plans and timelines, as well as equitable implementation and oversight structures. And as Lynn said, we don't have all of the answers perfectly formulated today, but we have an incredible framework to share with you. We have some good insights. We have some clear initial goals. And this was all possible because of the systematic way in which everyone engaged throughout the summit process. I want to thank the core leadership team for taking the time to listen to each other and having really tough conversations. Those who came together in the affinity group planning sessions, they really leaned in to this planning process. They were willing to imagine a different system in the future. They spoke truth, and they participated in constructive dialogue, all of which helped us synthesize to a clear set of achievable and measurable goals. The implementation team planning sessions were really comprised of the staff at ECHO and the staff at the City of Austin, a whole team led by Diana Gray. And this process was incredible because these two entities really committed to working in partnership and to become the implementation support structure needed to make this possible. It's going to take a village, And it started as a result of this process where everyone came together to appreciate the role that they can play. And they're beginning to do the work to train themselves and to organize themselves to get that done. I also want to thank those representing the voices of those who have experienced homelessness and the racial inequities that are experienced in this system and in so many other systems. The thoughtful, steady voices of you as individuals ensured that this planning process would not repeat mistakes of the past, but instead, it would ensure we invest in a new future. And I'm really excited to share that with you today. Finally, I need to thank the Clutch team for all of their hard work over the last few weeks. And I, in particular, want to thank Henry Carr. Henry is a brilliant mind and a big heart and a volunteer in this community. And he was able and willing to lean into this process with us and take this planning to a whole new level. So I want to express deep gratitude for what we are able to show you today as a result of all of that commitment. So let's begin. We're picking up right from where we left off in our last opening plenary session. What we learned through that is that homelessness is complex, that there is a complicated history, but that the solution to homelessness is supporting individuals' return to safe and decent housing. And that created a very clear initial charge as we moved into the rest of our planning activities. We knew that we must systematically build and scale our homelessness response system to become a rehousing system that can offer safe and decent housing to anyone who becomes homeless and adequately support their return to that housing. So that became the guiding principle of our work. And you'll see that, I hope, exemplified in the presentation today. As the core leadership team leaned in to this process and really listened to each other, they were able to reveal a vision. And that vision was to effectively end homelessness and advance toward a more equitable Austin by achieving equilibrium, where the homelessness response system has a rehousing intervention within 30 days for all those experiencing homelessness. So there's a lot of complexity built into this vision, but I want you to appreciate that this planning process started from a place of imagining how to service every single individual who may find themselves homeless in the future. We know we're not going to be able to get there overnight, but we can put ourselves on a trajectory to systematically build a system that can get that done. So it started with conceiving a new vision. And instead of responding to homelessness, we needed to think about how to build a homelessness rehousing system. And you're going to see from this slide and this illustration that we've tried to think comprehensively about the oversight that will be necessary, the leadership and governance, creating goals and transparency and accountability for achieving those goals, and wrapping ourselves in equity and understanding the importance of strategy that's grounded in equity as well as advocacy. We then conceived what is the core service delivery? How do all of the pieces of our system need to connect so that we can understand how to systematically invest in each of those pieces to build a system that is adequately scaled to reach equilibrium over time? We then considered the enablers. What are the key activities that need to be invested in order to make this vision possible? And there are some critical dignity builders that perhaps had been forgotten in the past that we needed to pull back into our vision. We need to ensure we understand and hear the experiences of those who are navigating our system and experiencing homelessness. We need to help connect those individuals to more than just housing It needs to be services and employment and wage growth opportunities. And we need to remember that everyone has a story, and we need to appreciate those stories in order to continue to be grounded in building an equitable system and building a system that works for the individuals that need it. So as you can see from this vision, we're very much grounded in supporting rehousing activities. We know that every individual who ends up experiencing literal homelessness, that there is an exit pathway for them. And we believe that there is an opportunity and a responsibility to consider all of those possible exit pathways, to consider the scale that we need to invest in each of those pathways, and to begin to systematically do that. We also want to help individuals who are at imminent risk of homelessness, knocking at the front door of our homelessness response system. We want to help those individuals avoid becoming homeless. And that's where we will invest in diversion. But if those individuals do in fact become homeless, and for those who are experiencing homelessness today, we want to amplify our outreach. We want to support a assessment and the ability to identify and help them navigate their exit pathway. We want to invest in exit pathways that range from permanent supportive housing for those with the most intense service needs, with the highest acuity. We also want to invest in a spectrum of rehousing solutions, rapid rehousing that can provide medium-term or temporary rental subsidies and services. We want to invest in rapid exit solutions for those who are just entering the homeless system. How can we immediately help them problem solve and provide financial assistance to rapidly springboard out of the homeless system? How do we activate shelters in a wide array of types in order to meet individuals' immediate needs and also support individuals connecting to their exit pathway more seamlessly? As each of these individuals embrace their exit pathway, we don't want to stop there. We know that the only reliable predictor of future homelessness is if you've experienced homelessness in the past. So it makes good sense to wrap some targeted prevention around all of those individuals who have exited our system and provide a bit of a safety net to ensure that if they experience housing instability once again, that we're prepared and available to immediately be responsive to that, to help them remain stably housed instead of asking them to return to the homelessness response system and navigate this process again. So many of these principles you've heard before. These are not entirely new. And the truth is, we've understood what it takes to respond to homelessness for a very long time. But it's been very difficult to organize all of these pieces and to invest at the scale necessary to really see the type of impact that we all hope for in our communities. This plan conceives how to organize all of those pieces and how to invest to reach that particular goal. I want to walk through now what our emerging initial implementation goals will be. And then I want to take us back to the system vision and explore each of these goals in particular. What is emerging is the need to put ourselves on a course to reach equilibrium. And in order to do that, we have to set a first milestone. So your core leadership team and all of the affinity groups considered, what would it take to rehouse an additional 3,000 individuals in 3 years? What would it take literally in terms of investment? What would it take in terms of action? What would it take to support and to grow and build a system that could achieve that? And how do we start to make those investments set a course to reach equilibrium? So we conceived these 3 initial implementation goals. So the first is to unlock 3,000 or more homes in 3 years. There's a variety of ways in which we're going to get that done. But in essence, we're looking at securing about 2,300 rental units in the market over the course of these 3 years. And we're going to use some landlord incentives like hold fees and risk mitigation in order to be competitive in the market. We're also going to invest in the development of about 1,000 units of permanent supportive housing. The good news is there's more than 230 units already in pipeline, and we know that there's a few more projects that are being considered. So this isn't an inconceivable goal in our particular timeline, because the community has already started to pivot in this direction. But it's not just about finding 3,000 homes or even making the rental subsidies available to help individuals become stably housed. We know we have some capacity building to do. We need to fortify our provider capacity. This plan conceives adding about 200 staff over the course of these 3 years in the form of case managers, outreach workers, and housing navigators. We also know that we need to ensure that we bring in new culturally reflective providers, that in order to achieve our goal of an equitable homelessness response system, that the individuals who are engaging those folks experiencing homelessness need to speak their language. They need to understand their journey and their experiences and demonstrate that this system is in fact here to provide a solution, to provide an exit pathway, and to accompany them on their journey so that they have confidence and faith to engage. Finally, we conceived a strategy that would ensure an equitable response to encampments. This includes repurposing, expanding, and retraining our outreach teams so that they can be culturally reflective in the ways that I just described. We also have conceived a way to initiate encampment rehousing activations that would be steered by a committee of equity and individuals with lived experience. We know that going to ground and bringing the rehousing solutions to those who are sleeping unsheltered outside on your streets and in your parks in Austin is going to be one of the most important features of this plan. And we need the expertise of those who have experienced homelessness and have experienced the racial inequities of this system and others to guide us in this journey to ensure that we don't repeat the mistakes of the past and that we succeed as a community together. So let's explore each of these pieces in a bit more depth. So let's start with unlocking 3,000 homes in 3 years. The primary areas of investment in order to achieve this would be in assess and guide, where we would bring housing navigators into the fold. These navigators would be standing beside every individual as they're offered housing and throughout all of the steps in order to secure that housing all the way to move in. We'll also invest in the actual housing interventions that provide the rental subsidies and the wraparound services. Those two interventions that will be responsive to rehousing that additional 3,000 individuals will primarily be rapid rehousing and permanent supportive housing. In addition, there's a variety of enablers that have to be invested in and brought to scale in our system. We need developer and landlord support. We need to look and consider sustainable funding, both to achieve this initial goal and to sustain the system. We need to reconsider some particular policies. We need political will and community support. And in addition, we need to ensure that the locations of these housing units have adequate access to transportation, health, and food. That individuals can only be stably housed when they can connect to the things in our community that all of us need to be healthy and safe. And we have to ensure that we consider that in our strategies. We also need to listen to those who are experiencing homelessness today. And we need to ensure that as we are assessing and guiding, that the voices of those individuals are at the forefront, and we provide choice in where those individuals can live, and we're particularly responsive to the needs of that individual as it relates to their unique housing situation. To fortify provider capacity, we need to invest heavily in reimagining our outreach teams, in housing navigators and case managers to provide housing stabilization supports once those individuals are housed. We'll also need continued political will and community commitment to ensure that we're truly meeting the needs of those individuals. We have to consider what it will take for our provider community to stretch and expand, adding an additional 200 individuals. So it isn't just a matter of putting resources on the table, it's also a matter of activating leadership that can support each of these agencies in their efforts. We need to think creatively about how to employ more individuals who've had lived experience. We need to think creatively about how to bring new agencies into our community. It's not just a matter of saying it, we need to actively organize around those activities. Of course, we need a data insight engine, and we have the homeless management information system, but we need to do more with that data. We need to centralize that data in all of our decision making. I appreciate so very much Lynn's point about the need for us to iterate as we grow this system to reach equilibrium. That iteration is going to be guided by the voices of the individuals experiencing homelessness and navigating our system, and by the insights that our data provides us. It's the combination of those two activities that will ensure we're building an equitable system and we're hitting the mark. Finally, we need to rehouse encampments equitably. So again, it's thinking about the composition of outreach teams, their voices, their cultural competence, and the cultures that they can reflect. It's also about ensuring we can provide targeted prevention. Once those individuals leave the encampments and are in housing of their choice, how do we help support them to remain in that housing or navigate to appropriate housing throughout their journey? The voices of those who are experiencing homelessness today are going to be paramount in equipping us as a system to execute on this particular goal. So that impact storytelling, listening to those voices, aligning our political will and community support behind a committee of those voices who are willing to go to ground and help every individual who's experiencing homelessness and living unsheltered access housing. Each of those same enablers that we've described throughout this process need to be activated, including space and safety management, in order to effectively achieve the healthy community we all desire for all of the individuals living in Austin. So, when we combine all of these goals, what's exciting is that we can actually do more than just house 3,000 individuals. We need to be accountable, and our first target is 3,000 because it's hard to help navigate individuals through a complex maze of activities and systems in order to achieve a successful rehousing placement. And we've set this target of 3,000 based on the reality that currently this number is just over the number of individuals who are on our streets today and in our shelters. This is the number we care about holding ourselves accountable to. It's our North Star in this moment. But we're not looking to design a system just for our first 3,000. We're designing a system that puts us on a path to reach equilibrium. So the system design targets, the upfront investment we're proposing, actually has the potential to unlock another 1,000 housing units. We also have the ability to invest in prevention, rapid exit, and diversion in addition to that permanent supportive housing and rapid rehousing, and help another 3,500 people either avoid entering the homelessness response system, rapidly exiting, or preventing them from returning. So, Austin has faced challenges for decades that have been difficult to solve when it comes to homelessness. And certainly the last few years, there's been an amplification of that. 3,000 more individuals housed in 3 years is a very ambitious goal, but we think we can get it done. We also know that we can set a course to serve far more than that. And the plan in front of you today, this initial milestone, puts us on a path to aim for equilibrium and to actually serve as many as 7,500 individuals. So let's talk about what it takes to invest to achieve this momentous outcome. I want to caution you a little bit in that all of the numbers, the investment figures I'm going to put in front of you are approximate. We have some really incredible dynamic modeling that we've done to bring this information to you. We're continuously updating that modeling because there's a variety of sources and a variety of data that we want to continue to pull in to refine that modeling. So these investment figures are subject to change, but we've run them several different ways. We think they're very reflective of what it will take to make this strategy come to life in Austin. So remember, we're talking about investing in permanent supportive and rapid rehousing to rehouse an additional 3,000 individuals in 3 years. We're also talking about investing in prevention, rapid exit, and diversion so we can stabilize more individuals in housing so they don't become entrenched in homelessness. And of course, we have to make some upfront investments to revamp our system because we don't have a system right now that's built to handle this kind of scale. So there's some upfront costs like landlord incentives, move-in kits, and all of the enablers, dignity builders, and oversight that we just described. So to fully rehouse as many as 4,000 people in rapid rehousing and permanent supportive housing, we're looking at about $160 million in operating expenses. That's what OpEx stands for. Operating expenses in this particular case include housing subsidies and the supportive services that an individual needs to remain stably housed. We're looking at an average cost of about $26,000 per person per year. We also need to invest some capital, so CapEx, capital expenses, in order to bring additional units to bear in your community. So this would include about 1,400 units of affordable housing, about 1,000 of which would be permanent supportive housing. This roughly equates to about $275 million. If you were to put it into a bond, you can spread that out over a 20-year period. So I want to put this into context. We're talking about $26,000 per person per year. And if we were just to pay for someone's rent, it's going to cost us about $18,000. But if we take that extra step and wrap services around that individual, we can invest less over time because we'll help those individuals stabilize in housing. So the additional cost to provide those supportive services is relatively negligible as compared to just simply the cost to live in Austin. To add that 3,500 additional opportunities to stabilize individuals through prevention, rapid exit, and diversion, it'll cost another $20 million in operating expenses. And we're looking at about $60 million over the 3 years in additional operating expenses, one time, to revamp our system and make all of these housing solutions possible. So that is a total of about $240 million in operating expenses over the course of those 3 years. And just to keep us honest, we compared this to what it would cost to expand emergency shelter for 3,000 individuals in 3 years. This would, of course, include having to build new emergency shelter. And the comparison there is it would cost about $300 million to simply expand emergency shelter. So we concluded as a result of this planning process, not that we aren't going to make strategic investments in the expansion of emergency shelter, but we concluded that we could get the same results in the same period of time with better outcomes for individuals by accelerating our investment in rehousing solutions like permanent supportive housing, rapid rehousing, rapid exit, prevention, and diversion. Now, some of you may have heard recently that Houston's annual costs to serve someone, Houston's annual per person cost is about $17,000. They recently testified to that at the state legislature. And we thought that this was an interesting comparison point because Houston has been investing in this system for nearly a decade. And they've already made their upfront investments in capital and in revamping their system. And I think that the approximate $17,000 per person annually today reflects how making these investments on the front end actually makes it more affordable down the road per person to respond to homelessness at equilibrium. So Houston is not quite at equilibrium yet. And of course, they have lower housing costs, but it is an important distinction. And it helps reveal that this upfront investment, while you have to sustain the investment to support the system, that the overall costs over time per person can in fact go down. And this was an important test to ensure that we in fact were on the right track in proposing these particular solutions in Austin. So here's what's really exciting is that it might be $240 million in operating expenses that we have to find. But the reality is we're not starting at zero. That there are already resources that have been committed, and there's certainly a wide array of anticipated funds that come from annual allocations, affordable housing investment processes that are reasonably accessible to this process. So we already have approximately 72 million in operating expenses committed or anticipated, and another 150 million in capital expenses, which means that our gap for these first 3 years is far less than the 240 million and 275 million that you see on the left of the screen. We're really looking at 168 and 125 million, respectively. What's really exciting is that there is a moment where the American Rescue Plan is infusing a large amount of resource into your community. So you have a source that didn't previously exist that can help accelerate your plan over the next 3 years. You can see that both the city of Austin and Travis County are receiving a substantial amount of resources. Now, all of these resources are not available for these types of activities, but some are. And this just demonstrates that with some investment from these incredible one-time funds, coupled with other possible sources in our community, we can easily close this gap. It's really important that I help you appreciate what it's going to take on the ground to ensure that we can meet our goal of housing 3,000 individuals in 3 years, and we can ensure equitable access. So our objective, as we were considering this from an implementation perspective, was to ensure that our unsheltered neighbors, as well as those in emergency shelter, have access to our new rehousing opportunities. So our approach is twofold. First, we want to solidify a no wrong door approach to our rehousing system. This means we have to fortify our coordinated entry system and our assessment process, and we need to ensure that individuals who have been identified as vulnerable and at the top of our housing list, that those individuals continue to move through our system toward these new housing resources that are available. We also want to bring these rehousing opportunities directly to our unsheltered neighbors living in encampments. We want to explore with our advocate partners how to outreach in a culturally proficient way. We want to explore how to equitably respond to encampments, and we want to fully utilize this new rehousing system that we're building. So, what that looks like is first securing and preparing a sizable pool of housing units so that as we offer housing to those on the coordinated entry wait list, and as we offer housing to those living unsheltered in encampments, that they have a choice of options. They can live in the part of town that they came from, or they have a support network in. That they can have opportunities to be near family or friends. Once we secure and prepare that sizable pool of housing units using our landlord incentives, we will then engage those sleeping unsheltered in targeted higher risk areas, as well as continue to house those assessed as highest risk from our housing wait list, regardless of location. So it's a two-pronged approach. We're going to be targeted, one encampment at a time, offering rehousing solutions, and any individual living in any encampment who is at the top of our waiting list will continue to be offered housing and supported. In addition to offering a permanent housing solution, we also want to make temporary shelter available while a unit is being prepped. This, of course, is going to be at the discretion of the individual, but we want to make sure that we are offering safe, dignified, non-congregate sheltering to those individuals if they choose to take that unit for the few days that it may take to identify or prepare their unit. So at the end, what this strategy really comes down to is making sure everyone has access and supporting each individual on their particular journey by building a system that can provide all of the services and choices that we need, and ultimately tools that we need to make this engagement possible. So I want to talk a bit more about what the key next step is. First, it's to strategize the encampment rehousing activations. I think you heard me clearly state that we're going to be forming a committee or a work group that includes individuals with lived expertise and advocates that can help us shape these encampment rehousing activations. We know how critical safety is in and around encampments to our communities, and we know that this is a tense topic. So the center for us is devising a humane, equitable, and efficient approach to support individuals returning to housing of their choice. We are proposing in the first 18 months of this plan to perform 24 of these encampment rehousing activations. We need to learn how to do this successfully. We need to iterate, and we need the individuals who understand the needs of those living unsheltered to help us. So there are a few principles that we are committed to. So the first is that we're going to target activations to a single encampment or area with the goals of building trust and support, then rehousing everyone within the activation timeframe. Once we have a reliable rehousing infrastructure in place, we can do this within a 2 to 4 week cycle, depending on the needs of those in each camp. And we'll continue to offer outreach post-activation. We will expand our outreach teams to include outreach, behavioral health, storage solutions, transportation solutions, sanitation, peer support specialists, and rehousing case managers with no law enforcement present so that we can foster a safe and nurturing relationship with these individuals in order to initiate their rehousing journey. We also want to design a primary rehousing pathway that allows individuals to go directly from the encampment into a permanent housing unit. but we will continue to offer non-congregate shelter for individuals at their discretion while their unit is being prepared. You can imagine the extraordinary lift that it will take to bring these rehousing resources to the ground. But it's one of the most effective ways to build trust among those sleeping unsheltered. It's not a promise of housing. It's literally bringing the application and bringing the transportation and bringing the storage solutions and bringing the case managers so that those individuals can move immediately into their housing unit, have a modest amount of furniture, household supplies, food, and the support that they need to begin the next phase of their journey. Key next step number 2, as Lynn alluded to, in order to activate the totality of this plan that we've just described to you, we need a really extraordinary governance model. We don't have that completely figured out yet. There's no one size fits all approach to governance. There's lots of different types of governance models. We have good implementation infrastructure to support this process. We have an incredible core leadership team. And what we now are working on is configuring all of those components and choosing the right structure that can ensure accountability, authority, and decision-making to make this plan a reality. What we ask from you in this moment is a little bit of patience so that we can invest our time to build the right model that can truly empower this system. But you should anticipate that that will be a future announcement along with the ability to track our progress in real time. Finally, I want to give you the particular milestones that we're aiming to hit. And this is the tracker that I was just describing. We are going to rehouse an additional 3,000 people in 3 years. We think that begins today. There have already been some resources invested. We've already activated some rehousing strategies, and we think we can house an additional 100 individuals by June. Then we'll then reach 200 by August, 400 by December, 1,200 by October 2022, and 3,000 by April 2024. I hope that as we make this tracker live, you will follow and you will see that we're ahead of pace, because I think that that's the level of commitment that has been demonstrated through the summit process. So we will need your support. And the question I have for you at the conclusion of this presentation is, are you ready for this journey? I want to thank you for the opportunity to support Austin through this journey, and I'll turn it over to the panel to answer your questions.
All right, Mandy, thank you for that. Okay, I put it in the chat room. What we really want to do now is hear from you all. I know that was an enormous amount of information. I am monitoring the chat. So let me start by letting you know who's going to participate on the panel. We've got Lyric Wardlow, who works in partnership with a lot of organizations to end homelessness for both youth and adults. And Lyric, if as I call your name, make sure you turn your camera on so everybody can see you. We have Chaz Moore with the Austin Justice Coalition, Bill Bryce with the Downtown Austin Alliance, Diana Gray, who is the Homeless Strategy Officer for the City of Austin. And I've got other people that we can call on, including Mandy and a few others that might get surprise questions. But as we start to get questions in the chat, let me start with just an overall question. Mandy, I love where you ended that conversation, which is, are you ready to join us on this journey? Lyric, I want to start with you, but I'm going to ask everybody just to say briefly, what would you say to this group of community leaders that we must have, not just as really as partners, as people who are willing to roll up their sleeves and work on this with us? What would you say to either inspire or challenge this group to join us in this?
Yeah, I'd say, at least for me, the reason why I'm a part of this work is that when I experienced homelessness, I didn't realize the complexity of how hard it is to address homelessness. And then when I got out of it, I realized just how deep of an issue it was, and just how, to be frank, how unorganized our city was when addressing this situation. And in a time like this, where we have people of color and young people on the streets experiencing homelessness and not getting accurate services, not getting the best help, when we have a chance like this is something that we need to take full advantage of, and have everyone, not just the city leaders and stuff like that, but the community as well, really understanding that this is something that like we need to move forward with to help the people who are still currently experiencing homelessness. Because today you'll go to work, you'll be on your calls, you'll eat your food at your home in your house with a roof over your head, and there will be people on the streets who are going through the toughest situations, because we have not yet been able to proactively help them in their situations, and have people who get housing and then end up exiting back into homelessness again. And so we need to take initiative, be proactive, and really think deeply about how we can take advantage of this current situation to help people who are still experiencing it. So
Awesome. Thanks, Lyric. Diana, I know you're relatively new in your role at the City of Austin, but what would you say to this group, that what is the most important thing that you need in order to do your part of this game plan?
I think that as a city, we are asking for the confidence of our community and the collaboration, both in terms of funding, which we really will need to scale up, as Mandy indicated, and just really the willingness to move forward, to begin to build on the work that has been being done over time in Austin. Great work by our nonprofits, but really coming to scale here, so we see that change in the very near future.
Awesome. Chaz, same question for you. What are your words of wisdom for this group? What are you asking for?
Yeah. At first, I want to apologize. I'm on my way to the Capitol, so I don't have my camera on. Always doing more than one thing at a time. But I would like to piggyback off what Diana just said. I think we're really going to need the city, the entire community, to really band together and dare I say, be a little bit more patient as we address this issue. I know that's something that city leadership and the echoes and those type of people have been talking about for a while, but I think now, because we have such a comprehensive plan and a path to get there, I really hope that the community gives us just a little bit more time to get to where we need to address these problems and situations. But also, like Diana said, this is going to take everybody. It's going to take everybody in forms of giving, everybody in terms of boots on the ground, in terms of doing their research and homework. This is really going to take a good old Austin effort to make sure we can get to these solutions together. And I really hope people just come at this with an open mind. This is something new, and it should be exciting. Although we know new things are not perfect, and we're going to have to work through some of the things that need work on. But I'm sure that if we band together, as we've done plenty of times in the past, the road ahead.
Whoops, he cut out a little bit. Chaz, I know there's going to be some questions for you, but if you end up heading into the Capitol, we'll try and field them. And just really quickly, I want to thank Commissioner Shea. She's letting us know that she's got to sign off, but is appreciative of all the work that has gone into this. Bill Bryce, what would you say to this group that is absolutely essential for this to work?
Good morning, everybody. Bill Bryce with Downtown Austin Alliance. Thank you so much for being part of this morning. I think first and foremost, one major point is we have got to treat homelessness like the crisis that it is. Lyric expressed in her comments, and I'll reframe it a little bit differently, but every hour, every day that we spend talking about this is another hour and day that people are out on our streets, thousands of people experiencing the unsafety and indignity of being homelessness. So we have got to address this as the crisis that it is. Not only do we need to unify all of our providers, service providers, housing providers around a common strategy and goal, but we've got to convince the community, and I think we can only convince the broader community by demonstrating that we can make progress and show an impact, that having a unified strategy is critical to our success. Last, I think it's important to recognize, and I think many of us have acknowledged the fact that government alone can't solve this problem. For too long, we have relied on our government, looked to city and others to solve this. It takes an entire community rallying around a common goal, common strategy in order to be effective. And so we have got to go beyond our service providers and housing providers and our public sector, recognizing that it takes the private sector, private philanthropy, and the community as a whole to rally around this strategy to solve this critically important problem.
Thanks, Bill. Okay, so you heard it from the panelists. We've got to put every single one of you in a position to where you are leaning into this set of solutions. You're advocating for these solutions. You're doing your part, and you've been carefully selected as someone who has a supersized influence on this community. So with that, ask whatever questions you have on your mind. If you're thinking it, so is someone else, so that we can put you in a position to play that role. Diana, I'm going to ask this first question to you. Are we collaborating with surrounding jurisdictions, and how can folks in outlying areas support this process?
Absolutely. So one of the very prescient that you mentioned, Commissioner Shea, there's an active conversation with Travis County right now about how we can best collaborate. And then I also want to say that this is not just about the counties and the cities, but there are other entities that are really critical to this collaboration. Central Health, Capital Metro really is an important partner for us in terms of ensuring that as we seek diversity in the areas of town that people have housing choice in, that we are also aligning transportation resources. So there is a lot happening. There is more to do. And I agree that with the scale of the problem, looking at this from a regional lens is also really important.
Okay, Mandy, this next question, I think I'm going to ask you to answer it because it's a very broad question about the overall capacity in terms of staffing that we have to build. And the question is, what strategy should we consider to quickly hire qualified staff to get these initiatives off the ground?
It's a great question. So this is a challenge every community faces as it's attempting to scale, especially when there's one-time investment that's infused into a system. So some of the most creative ways to do that include taking your most experienced staff and hiring less experienced staff underneath them and forming smaller teams so that you can carry a larger caseload and you can start to equip and train individuals who are new to the field as a result. Leaning into individuals with lived experience, those who have experienced homelessness in the past, they have so much to offer in practical life skills. And oftentimes, while it's very important that we have a good mix of trained and skilled social workers in our sphere, you don't necessarily need all of those social work skills to provide the support that individuals need to navigate these systems. So there is a lot of individuals that have experienced homelessness in the past who are ready and willing to be employed by the system. So thinking creatively about how to expand using and valuing knowledge that comes from different avenues than just a social work degree are some of the initial strategies that can get that done. Among others, I think partnering with a broader public workforce system and really thinking about how to accelerate training and practice is one of those enabling activities that you need leadership around to support and activate.
And Lyric, why don't you weigh in on this question as well? Because I know that you are someone that has lived experience and has a strong opinion about how that fits into this solution set?
Yeah, to that question that was asked around who would be most qualified to hire kind of in this situation, I think kind of what was being said, the lived expertise piece is pretty important. And I think that if we're talking about equity, we want to have people with lived experiences a part of this process. And just because they may not hold a degree does not mean that they cannot be qualified to do the job. I do not have a degree. I have not finished my schooling, but I can show up in spaces and talk as though I've gotten my master's, no problem. So I think we need to really think about how to support people who have not gotten those qualifications yet, and how to give them that training or give them as much educational experience as they can to kind of have that lived expertise, as I like to call it, in every space. So I think that is something that should just always be prioritized, as well as finding people who match the demographics that we're serving. So we can not only be hiring people who are Caucasian and expecting solutions to come and be, fruitful. We really need to be addressing the population and making sure that people feel comfortable when receiving services. So yeah.
Great comment. And I think it's probably intuitive to everybody that's listening that, as we move through this complex set of solutions, making sure that it resonates with the people for whom these solutions are being designed is essential. Mandy, this one I'm going to put in your lap. You've got a ton of experience with other communities and deep experience with Houston. What are your biggest concerns and risks that you see in our community that could hurt our success? And how should we plan for them?
Yeah, so I think when there is heightened political complexity around your unsheltered population, it's very easy to become fractured. And I would say prior to the summit, one of your biggest risks is that there were a lot of different voices moving in different directions on this issue. And so this summit has really brought all of those voices, all of that leadership, all of that energy together. And one of the biggest risks is that doesn't sustain. I think leadership, unified leadership on this issue is going to be one of the most critical features, and has been the difference maker in so many other communities that have made substantial progress in building rehousing systems. You need a champion who will hold the vision and help elevate and align and reconcile all other priorities to meet that vision, because that is how you're going to get to the community everyone desires. There are other risks that are, I think, obvious to everyone. We need to ensure that we can access units all throughout the community. And we need landlords, property owners to be welcoming. We need them to participate and engage. This plan can put some incentives on the table to do that, to mitigate perceived risk. But we need a willingness and an open heart on the part of this community to want to rehouse individuals, because that is the humane thing to do, it's the moral thing to do, and it's the neighborly thing to do. So, there's always a series of risks and complexities, but I would say that those two, in my mind, stand out for you in Austin, and communities that have been really committed in those two arenas and have brought leadership to those two spaces have seen the most success.
Great. So this question, I'm gonna give the asker on this one. This comes from Commissioner Howard. So this is someone with deep expertise, and she asked the following question: please comment on your vision for adding temporary shelter, and can it work to attach RRH and PSH to these shelters? And Diana, why don't you start off with that? And then Bill, I want to see if you have anything you want to add.
Sure. So this is something that I think we talked a lot about. And to Mandy's point of, really doing the analysis and understanding that there are clearly costs associated with temporary shelter as well. And that so our focus really is on permanent housing. but that we also acknowledging that there, particularly as we build our sort of portfolio of available units in the rental market or develop units, there may be a period that we need to, find a unit and move folks in, that the commitment then is to size the availability of those crisis beds to the resources of, people moving toward permanent housing. So that, for example, if, in the next 6 months, we think we're going to move 500 people into housing and we believe we're going to need, 200, I'm just making up a number here, beds of people who will need to be temporarily sheltered during that time, that's how much shelter we target. We don't just build 1,000 beds without the exit strategy in mind in a balanced system.
Okay. So there's a question that's come up, and I'm not sure exactly who to direct this to, but the question is, how does APD, Austin Police Department, fit into this? And I want to be clear, Mandy made it very clear that in terms of the outreach, the case managers, that is not an APD response. And yet we know that there have been other concerns expressed around safety. So how does APD fit into this overall picture of homelessness in Austin? And Mandy, I'll start with you. And then if you want to weigh in, I'll just open it up.
So when we were exploring this in the Affinity work sessions, we noted that there are models and best practices across the country that are inclusive of specialized and individuals within law enforcement. So often homeless outreach officers. And that they've been integrated into outreach teams, and there has been success in that. They were not integrated to provide safety or to enforce, but just simply were integrated to provide a variety of different types of resources. So for example, in some communities, they're incredibly important at providing access to temporary identification in order to help move individuals into housing. So as we explored some of these ideas and best practices, what was evident from the individuals who have experienced homelessness in Austin is that while there may be good intentions behind some of those practices, those have not been the experiences of individuals. And in order to initiate the type of plan we've conceived at scale, that we needed to draw a line to say, let's start with outreach teams that don't include law enforcement until we can understand how to move toward a set of best practices, because the experiences of the past just don't lend themselves to just jumping into an experience of another community. So that's the framing for that comment, and I think it's really important to listen and honor individuals based on their experiences. It doesn't mean that this has to be true forever. It just means for now, we need to take a step back and really be thoughtful about the presence of law enforcement and how that changes the engagement dynamic, and does it really achieve the result we're looking for?
Got it. Chaz, I just want to check in with you. Are you on the line? I have a question for you, but I'm not sure.
I'm still here. Can you hear me?
Yep, good. I just didn't
Okay.
want to throw you a question if you were getting tested for COVID or something in one of those tents.
Laura, may I respond to the last question if related?
Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
First of all, I think police do play a role in this equation, but I think it's probably different than what most people assume is the typical response in terms of enforcement. We know you cannot enforce away the issue of homelessness, number one. But we also know through a local model, our host homeless outreach street team, that frankly was modeled somewhat after Houston's HOT team, but created an interdisciplinary team approach and a proactive approach to addressing people who are experiencing unsheltered homelessness, to try and get in front of a 911 call, a crisis from occurring, and to meet people where they are and to try and understand and meet their needs. Police also are there to protect people experiencing homelessness. We know people who are living unsheltered are vulnerable and exposed to very unsafe conditions, often is the case. So police have a role there. The police department and those who are responding to these types of issues and concerns require special training. It's about developing trust. It's about helping people get to the services that they need, but also recognizing that a police officer alone is not always the best response, the most appropriate way to respond. But I think they do play an important role in this equation. If I may take 1 second to step back to the shelter question. I know you said you were going to tag me on that and move forward before I was able to respond. Shelter helps us treat this like the crisis that it is. Is it appropriate to allow people to say, or for us to, as a community to say, until we find a housing unit where you can be permanently, or rejoin you with family or your network that can provide for you, we're just going to let you linger out on the street, languish out there. To me, that is so wrong as a community. And while it takes a long time in some cases to create the housing that we need to get people off the street, in the meantime, we must do better. We have a responsibility to do better. And we recognize certainly that shelter is not ideal. Shelter needs to be short-term, temporary, and it also needs to be housing focused, but it does play a key role in this equation. Certainly some people can and should move right from the street unsheltered into housing, but if that's not an option, then we need something in between to say, we can do better than you being out on the street without anything, including a bathroom, a shower, other services that you need. And I think that Camp Esperanza has provided a unique example. And I'm not saying by any means that that is ideal. That needs to be improved, and we're working toward that. My point in this example, though, is when the governor a year and a half ago said, I will dedicate a roughly 5-acre piece of ground with nothing on it and put restrooms out there for people to go. More than 100 people went there just for that, because they were allowed to be there. They were safe because they provided security. They had bathrooms. Now they have case management, shower facilities, place to do their laundry, and more happening there, where we're trying to take a new look at a micro shelter approach. But my point is that in my mind demonstrates that if people just have a place they know they can be and be safe and secure, many are willing to be there rather than under the bridge or on the street somewhere else where it's very much less safe and they have less services. So I think shelter plays a critical role. It needs to be housing focused. It needs to be short term. That's not the end of the line for people. And it needs to be appropriate. Right now, congregate shelter, considering health and safety concerns, is not a reasonable alternative. How do we create individualized micro shelter units? That's a sort of a new a theme that we are trying to develop here in Austin, and I think holds merit for the future. But we cannot think and suggest that shelter alone is the answer. It absolutely is not. Housing is the answer. Getting people rehoused is the answer.
Thanks, Bill. And I think that Mandy, in using the systems approach, that explicitly acknowledges that what we are presenting to you all today includes the yes and approach to interventions. And that includes everything from emergency shelter, understanding its weaknesses, all the way to permanent housing. Okay, Chaz, to you. One of the things that I think would be really helpful for this group of people to understand is there are other there are other ways of talking about this issue that we've seen most recently with the City Council passage of HEAL. Can you just quickly talk about how that fits into this approach?
Yeah, I think Chris Harris will be a lot better to talk about this than me. But I think HEAL fits in because HEAL was like the HEAL initiative by Councilwoman Ann Kinchin and other folks on City Council is just like one step of this many-pronged approach to make sure we are removing people from encampments that are unsafe, that are unsanitary, and making sure we get them into some form of short-term or long-term housing. I know some of the critics of HEAL say, this is not the answer, and they're right, it's not the answer, but it's just a first step, a very small approach that fits into all of this, right? Like, I think the concern right now is that as we begin to approach another hot Texas spring, well, I mean, I really don't know what it's going to be because, climate change, but if we approach the weather that we're used to here in Texas, and as we start doing Storm Uri, we know that we have to get these people in some type of sheltered environment because it's just simply not safe on the street. So I think the HEAL initiative is the first of many steps that are going to help us get to the ultimate end goal of making sure that we have at least 3,000, hopefully more, if needed, people in permanent, low affordable, safe housing in 3 years. So I hope that answered the question.
It did. Thank you. Thank you. Mandy, a question that's coming up, and I'm going to get you guys to we're going to go a little rapid fire here because the questions are coming in. What have you seen as the biggest barrier to landlords making space for the homeless population? That's such an important piece of this strategy. Do we need to anticipate anything or solve for anything on the front end?
That's a great question. So I think oftentimes the barriers we've seen come down to perceived risk. So when when a social worker is helping an individual approach a landlord, asking a landlord to take a chance on someone, I think further asserts that there's risk involved in housing that individual. And one of the most successful things we've done in other communities is engage landlords and normalize the rental process for individuals. So the reality is that individuals who have a housing voucher, individuals who have experienced housing instability or homelessness in the past are no different than any other renter. And there's no additional risk attached to that. And so we've utilized strategies not to eliminate the perception of risk. We've used strategies to try to outcompete others in the market, because what it really comes down to is not that landlords won't rent to individuals who are voucher holders or who have experienced housing instability in the past. What it comes down to is we need to compete against other candidates in the rental market. And so how do we use an incentive structure that changes the narrative and reminds landlords that this is really about a pool of individuals who need a place to live, and there's rental assistance to guarantee that the rent is going to be paid. Now we as a system want to jump to the front of the line so that we can make sure that those units are secure and accessible. So, there is an opportunity here for landlords to lean in and benefit from that economic incentive structure that we're creating. And it starts with normalizing that this is just a rental transaction like any other rental transaction.
Got it. Lyric, I saw that your hand was up, but then down. Do you want to add something in there?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think this is something that I still experience kind of like my own heated arguments about, is just kind of the topic of risk for people experiencing homelessness to be housed. I think it's really difficult when the rental structure is already so strict in general. I mean, we're requiring so many things like rental history to be great, credit history needs to be amazing, 3 times the rent. If you're late, you have these fees that incur. And with people experiencing homelessness, there is an almost guarantee that those kind of requirements are not going to meet the places where people experiencing homelessness are at currently. Like if you're expecting them, if they are late on rent on the first 3 days of the month, and you're going to charge them $150 for being late, I mean, that is a situation where we're already putting them into that risk of being homeless again. And so it's not like the people experiencing homelessness are an issue or a threat or a problem. It's because the way we're renting currently and the way our rental policies do not help people who are lower income, who are people of color, who are looking for that kind of like foot in the door. And so I think we need to change kind of the identifying people experiencing homelessness as a risk, but more of the rental process itself is a major barrier into getting housing. So I needed to say that.
Oh, good. I think that's excellent. Thank you for that. Here's a question. So we've identified as part of the solution set that we need to create some new housing options. And the question is, have there been any discussions as part of this plan of an investment in large affordable housing communities, a hybrid of Haven for Hope, but more focused on extremely affordable housing. And let me decide who to pick on. Oh, that's what you get for smiling, Diana. How about you take a shot at that?
Yeah, I think that there are things to learn from Haven for Hope. And for me, the lessons that I draw from that is that San Antonio thought at scale about response to a problem, and thought and implemented a very robust public-private partnership to create Haven for Hope. However, I think one of the things that we've learned nationally and have certainly seen here in Austin is that we want to be really intentional about housing choice and equity. And so while we want to think about lots of units, we don't necessarily want to concentrate all of those in a single place. And so, what I would take from that model is that when we as a community have a major redevelopment effort in any part of town, that we really think about very housing that is deeply affordable, whether that is set aside for people who have experienced homelessness or just folks with relatively low incomes overall, really be an integral part of that, really in terms of our overall built environment of our community and that infrastructure.
Okay, and then let's add to that question. And Bill, I'm gonna ask you to answer this one. Alan Graham just announced a major expansion of his housing solution. From your point of view, how does that fit in? How does that kind of solution play a role in this? And how do you see the increase of housing needed in the same light? In other words, should we do, affordable housing communities, sprinkle it throughout the community? And how does Alan Graham's community fit into this?
Thank you. So I think there's a couple of things about that. First of all, Community First Village represents a tremendous model that is very unique and obviously has gathered attention from around the globe as a model. Community First Village, I think we've learned so many lessons from that you can't, that resolving a person's homelessness is about more than just rehousing them. It's about everything that needs to accompany having a roof over your head to make a person feel safe and secure, help them live a fulfilling life. And the lessons we've learned there, people being able to, one, generate revenue through internal resources they're provided there, express themselves through faith, through art, through other crafts and other means, establishing a sense of community, rebuilding community that people experiencing homelessness have often lost completely, or perhaps regained in part on the street, but lose if they go into a housing unit apart from the people that they've sort of created family with on the street. So I think there are tremendous lessons that we've learned from that. And I think that's a critically important component of addressing homelessness here in Austin. It, however, just like every other singular idea alone, is not the answer. Not everyone experiencing homelessness wants to be at Community First Village, or that environment may not be exactly suitable based on a person's needs. And I think we have to recognize that. And again, while it's a tremendous model and very well serving hundreds of people right now, it's not necessarily alone the answer. And so I think we can learn a lot from that. I think it also demonstrates that when the community sees an effective model, and this has become very tangible, and they recognize that it's effective, they'll get behind it. And, as a community, that is what's most important. We have got to be able to demonstrate that we can be effective, whether it's a model like Community First Village or other models. And by the way, there are multifamily settings for people who are formerly homeless that have a lot of the components to build community within them that are also very successful here in Austin. And so, again, it's not a one size fits all. I think that's an important part of us addressing homelessness here in Austin, but it's one piece to a very complicated puzzle.
Okay, thanks for that. And I want to point out that Alan is reflecting on our efforts as well. So these are not two different processes in the same way that HEAL is not a different process from what we're talking about. And I think Amber may be on the call, and Amber, if you want to weigh in the chat, go for it. I want to come back to some landlord questions, but really quickly on HEAL, I really appreciated Chaz's response to that. And I also just want to read to you what Councilmember Kitchen says about HEAL. And as you know, she was the author of that. And what she's saying is that the HEAL and the Community Summit approach are aligned with the shared goal of safe and secure housing and an end to homelessness in our community. The HEAL initiative is designed for people to be safe and secure in permanent housing. Each person is engaged in working toward resolution that is best suited to his or her needs and desires. The result is a permanent, person-centered solution with the highest possibility of success. And so I hope that you all that are listening to this and preparing to deeply engage with us, that we're not talking about 2 or 3 efforts. We're talking about a single purpose that we're all working on, and it includes HEAL, it includes Alan Graham's announcement, it includes emergency shelters, and it includes a complete solution of housing. Okay, so there are some questions here about landlords, and let me just see what if anything can policymakers do to help foster a more positive relationship with landlords. Let's see who I would like to answer that. Mandy, since you've got experience outside of Austin and this is something we might be facing, what are best practices out there? What can we learn from your experience?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I don't, so I'm not certain that I have as much experience with policymakers leaning in to this particular space, other than allocating for the resources to, to initiate incentives. I think policymakers have leaned in other communities with a call to action among landlords to come join policymakers in making units available and in helping. But it is interesting to contemplate. I mean, certainly there are a variety of policies that you could consider that would help make affordable housing more accessible across the community. But I'm not certain that is the kind of nature of this particular question. So it's worth exploring in more depth.
Well, and maybe we just put it on the watch list, right? We know it's an important part of the strategy. And if we see barriers emerge, that is part of what the governance structure would be looking for as problems to solve. And Matt, Malika, I know you know that I was not going to let you off the hook in this panel. So here we go. There is a center of gravity in these questions. If you think about them thematically around, what are some of the obstacles, the practical obstacles that we might encounter as we try to produce more housing? Is this in fact a complete effort that includes solutions that have been discussed in this community over the last several years? ECHO is certainly central to the game plan here. And I just want to give you a chance to weigh in on any or all of the issues that have been raised so far.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. I think your points are well taken about trying to tie in all of the, that we're working now under one plan and tying in all these initiatives. Community first is such an important part of that. Creating bridge and temporary shelter options as we move folks into permanent housing and rapid rehousing, housing people directly out of encampments. Broad landlord strategies, right? Because we have to be able to work in the private market is so crucial and key. And I think as we roll up these initiatives, we have to keep the focus on involving people with lived expertise and involving the people that we're trying to impact on the street. That's the most important aspect of this, is talking to folks, getting out there, getting people that they trust in front of them, and asking about what they need to resolve their situation. And on all situations are individual, and there isn't one collective answer. And I think that's really important. And we're lucky to have so many great projects on the horizon. When you look at something like the Sparrow at Rutland that Caritas is bringing on, that's a great project, a massive project for permanent supportive housing that's going to be there forever. It's going to be deeply affordable, permanent supportive housing in our community. The strategies to convert hotels and motels to permanent supportive housing that's happening now, where we have two two of those projects coming to fruition this year is a big, a big step in the right direction. So you're seeing a development happen, something that happens, bricks and mortar, new development going up to bring on new housing units. You see the conversion of what weren't being used as housing units that are now being converted to permanent housing units in our community. Two big steps. You see a lot of work that has to happen in the private market to work in a high cost market with landlords in our community. So you see this, what we call a scattered site housing model across our community, bringing new housing forward. You see a community first village and their expansion of 1,400 units. So now you start to see this sort of continuum of new, deeply affordable housing units becoming available. And how do we continue to incentivize that growth is really important. It's a multi-pronged approach. It does not consist of one generic strategy to make that happen. We need more Aspero at Rutland's. We need more hotel conversions. We need more community first. We need better access to the private market. And I think as we start to build that up and build the muscles, the right types of muscles to address that in our community, you'll start to see this vision take shape of, choice for people, long-term choice, bridge choices to get them into the private market. It's just these strategies all start to come together when you look at them all, working together and building muscles out in different parts of the deeply affordable housing market. And that's the beauty of how all this comes together, is the money we have to raise, the dollars coming in from the federal government can be used in each of these settings. They can be used out at Community First. They can be used to convert hotels and motels. They can be used to support housing and services at Aspero at Rutland. They can be used really dynamically. And that's how we have to think about this effort and deploy this type of resource at scale.
Yeah, I think if you get nothing else out of this session, for those of you that are listening and thinking about these issues with us, there is no single, simple, cheap solution. It is a complex problem that is going to require a whole suite of interventions. Matt, I know you turned off your camera, but I'm not quite done yet. Nice try. So here's my other question for you. There's another major investment that's going on in this community that was authorized by voters that I think can be an important part of this, and that is Project Connect. And as that mobility system is built out, knowing that affordability and avoiding displacement, there was some real thoughtfulness that went into that. How do you see those investments that will span several decades in this community, and they'll be huge? How can that play a role in this?
Yeah, that's a great question, Laura. Thank you. And I think, Project Connect and the anti-displacement funds that were baked into that project, I think 300 million or 350 million, those are going to have to be used really strategically, right? Because it's not just about building affordable housing in those places. It is about an anti-displacement message where folks who live in those communities can access those funds to stay in the community that they need. They can improve their housing situation. They can the funds are very flexible. And I think, it's really important to mention that we want to make sure that we go into those communities and work with those communities directly around how to build out, what they need in use of those anti-displacement funds. And I think that piece is crucially important. The second piece to that, of course, is that the access to transportation, which is so desperately needed in this city, in Austin. I think we're going to see a real change in how people can access, employment, supportive services, health related healthcare services, how they can get back and forth to their homes, and how those transportation options reach into the community. Really, really important to start to bring these resources into communities, but not disrupt the culture and the neighborhood on a really granular level. We have to be able to enhance and bring resources into those communities to make them better and more equitable places for people to live.
Thanks for that, Matt. I do think it's important when this community makes major investments that we can do two things at once, at least. Okay, another question. Diana, I'm going to start with you, but Lyric, I also want you to weigh in on this, since you have a particular passion and expertise around young people and how that fits into this. And the question is, both Houston and Austin have learned a lot, and benefited from that knowledge to house thousands of homeless veterans. Austin is on the cusp of reaching equilibrium for housing young adults. Does the plan include completing the community goal of ending youth homelessness soon? There's a lot to unpack there, so go for it, Diana.
Sure. And I'm gonna answer a couple things or share a couple thoughts and then let Lyric take it. I think right now the plan is certainly, looking at our resourcing of the system at a global level, but certainly we know that we have a substantial unsheltered youth homelessness issue. And so that's really critical. I was thinking about the issue around veterans and around youth as we've been talking. And I think that, what strikes me as really important is that this is not our first rodeo, right? When our community has set explicit goals and focused, had a lot of success. So we were able to reach functional zero, if you will, with veteran homelessness. We set some previous goals for the creation of PSH units. Those were modest and they need to be bigger, but we did it. And then we've moved really aggressively toward reducing youth homelessness. So for me, that's a big lesson that comes out of those efforts that I think we need to carry over into this more aggressive, grand vision of really moving the needle in our community. But then I want to pass it to Lyric and Matt. I may also have some thoughts about the efforts around youth homelessness.
Yeah, I think when I heard that question, I really think about like kind of the middle ground that happens between adult or older adult homelessness and then youth, especially. And when we're talking about creating new jobs and more of that stuff that really creates sustainability for people experiencing homelessness, I think this will align with the youth homelessness, like ending youth homelessness in Austin specifically. And like, how do we make sure that when we're talking about giving people more jobs in Austin who experience homelessness, how do we do that in a way that like really reaches youth, especially not just like the positions that are higher level and that kind of stuff, but like what are youth interested in? How can we make sure ACC is providing the support that they need when when going into schools or going into higher levels of education. So I think there are things that when we're thinking about support systems and ways that we can help people experiencing homelessness through this new plan, I think there will be lots of moments where we'll be really thinking about addressing the younger side of people experiencing homelessness and how we can do that proactively throughout this whole new journey. So.
Thanks for that, Lyric. Okay, let me do a check here. Chris Harris was going to be on the call earlier, representing Appleseed, but also just a super important member of this coalition. And Chris, if you're on the call, speak up real quick. I got a whole ton of questions for you. Okay. Mandy, one thing I want to get you to do is we have used the term equilibrium a number of times in this conversation, and that probably means different things to different people. I've been seeking it in my life for a long time. What does it mean in this context? And how can we, really clearly and crisply explain what achieving equilibrium in any element, whether it's youth or overall in this system, actually means?
Yeah, so when we're modeling to identify how to get to equilibrium in a homelessness response system, what we're modeling for is when does the anticipated number of people who will experience housing instability and fall into homelessness equal the amount of exit pathways that we can make available within a 30-day period, which would basically mean that no one would experience homelessness for longer than 30 days. So it meets that concept of making homelessness rare, brief, and non-recurring. The number of people experiencing homelessness in any given moment meets the amount of resources that we have available to serve them. That's what equilibrium means. So I appreciate there's some technical details in all of that, but simply put, we want to be able to produce a housing solution for everyone within 30 days. How do we scale our system to do that? And how do we reduce the number of people experiencing homelessness so we can find that equilibrium?
That's great. And Bill, why don't you weigh in on this too? Because I know that you've been so active with not only the downtown community, but throughout Austin on this issue. And I've heard you talk about this in a way that makes a lot of sense also.
Well, I just think that having sufficient resources to meet inflow is critically important. I think that a big piece of the equation is also prevention. How do we slow down the inflow of people coming into a condition of homelessness? And to me, the only way to really end homelessness or solve homelessness is through prevention, while we're also trying to manage homelessness for people that are already experiencing it. So moving them out of the crisis of homelessness into permanent housing, but also slowing down the inflow. That requires many, many different system changes in the criminal justice system and in many other systems, frankly, to keep people housed or prevent them from becoming homeless. So I think the equilibrium issue is really important. And I recognize Commissioner Howard's question in the chat too about, wondering if youth and veterans initiatives are included in this plan. And while they're not explicitly called out, I think it's important to acknowledge that this plan, underpinning this plan, is we have got to keep doing everything that we have been doing that's been effective. And I think that we've done a poor job as a community at expressing our successes and making the community aware of all the successes that we are having as a community. We need to amplify that so that we have better equilibrium. We start to see the unsheltered numbers go down. We're solving for people, but ultimately we've got to work upstream within systems that will help us decrease the inflow of people and help that balance come quicker and last longer into the future.
Thank you for that. And you raise an important point that's come up over and over again, and that is data and reporting out and accountability to the community for these goals. So let me ask Diana and Matt, what can you say to this group about our commitment to being transparent with data and information so that as we come forward with the 3,000 people in 3 years, people can really see where we are in that process and know that we're holding ourselves accountable to those goals?
I'm happy to start. I think, this is a great opportunity for us, certainly for ECHO and for our community to be much more communicative and transparent about the data in our system. And I think that for a long time, and I know a lot of places across the country and service providers and certainly ECHO's role as the continuum of care lead agency, they struggle with trying to really contextualize the data. It's not, this isn't a scenario where we have a static population of people experiencing homelessness. And I think that what we have to do is not let the perfect be the enemy of the good right now, and really just be transparent about the numbers that we have, the way that we're, the limitations of the data that we have, but also the information we can glean off the data that we have too, and let the community absorb it. Let people ask questions, let people be curious, let people help us try to improve our data quality and the way that we present our data to the community. And so I think as we're seeing this sort of pivot into, as we take on this summit work and we talk about some, surging a system and some transformation around that, and what that will look like. A key piece to that is also allowing the data to come with it, to be really transparent, to be honest and open to, to suggestion and improvement. And I think, and to really be clear that, we do have some really good data. We do have data that's really solid and, in terms of intervention type, and we know what works. And to amplify that message as well, because there's a like you talk about youth homelessness, and that's an area where we have a really clear data. We have partners like LifeWorks and SAFE and Caritas that have been in this field and getting us really good data on youth homelessness and how close we are to ending youth homelessness in this community and how we have to get that across the finish line. And we can use what we know about how we, how we collect that data to inform how we roll out this the surge and the information to the community about unsheltered homelessness and chronic homelessness in our community. So there's a pivot that has to be made there, and we have to own that. And I think that's part of gaining the community's trust around the work that we're doing.
Thank you for that, Matt. Okay, I think we have answered all the questions that I've gotten in the chat. I do want to just point to a comment that's made, which is that incorporating education and training of the youth to direct them into the workforce will need to address this crisis. I think that's true of youth plus everybody else. And there are certainly connections to be made with job training and opportunities as well. We're growing our economy, and that creates opportunities that job training can directly connect with. So I'm going to offer you all this. I know this has been a ton of information. Let me see if I can summarize some of the high level takeaways. One, we've got a specific ambitious goal now, 3,000 people in 3 years. We have worked with all of the service providers to make sure that we understand that this is an all of the above solution set. We are going to need to invest in solutions from everything from emergency shelters through permanent housing. Each of those areas lacks capacity and in some cases, capital investment. And Mandy did a beautiful job of showing you what those numbers look like. So, you know, there is an operational investment that needs to be made and maintained, and then there's a capital investment. But we are not starting from ground zero. There is money already in this system. We are also standing at the edge of opportunity with some of the federal money that's come in, and decisions about that at the city and the county level, at least discussions, will begin next week. And I would be remiss if I did not say that there is a need and an opportunity for private fundraising and for the business community to invest in these solutions. And this is an all-in effort from the standpoint that this does include things like Alan Graham's announcement of additional units this week. So what my hope is, and I think what our hope is that you can see the robustness of this plan. It has been a lot to digest, so I just want to encourage you to continue asking questions. The email is summit@austinchamber.com. Any questions, comments, if you think we missed something, if you want us to really give thought to something that hasn't been mentioned, please reach out. And here's why. We're not just counting on you. We're going to ask you to help us as we move through the implementation of this game plan. It's really, really important that this be community led. It has been so far, but to push this through, it's going to take your commitment to staying on board and engaged with this process. And somebody asked, can we engage neighborhoods? Yes. So with that, let me just thank everybody for their time and attention. Let me ask the panelists, Lyric, starting with you, final word.
My final word, I think, as a person with lived expertise being in this space, it's really weird sometimes just because I'm a 22-year-old who never thought that any of my experiences would matter. But after acknowledging the fact that having a parent and being around people my entire life from the age of 10 until now, knowing people who experience homelessness and now working with them and just hearing how much this does impact not just them, the people experiencing homelessness, but the community and the people actually trying to help. I know how much power there is in being in this space. And I think we all do care about people experiencing homelessness. And that is why we're in this space doing this work and really trying to figure out how we can best go about this process. But I really think that this is an important thing that we need to be doing, a conversation that we have to have, and we all just have to figure out how to come to that agreement around people experiencing homelessness need the support and help and the kind of pushing away from the negative stereotypes that we have placed on people experiencing homelessness, and really supporting them and figuring out how we can help them in the best way in this new plan. So I'm excited, and I just want to say thank you.
Thanks, Lyric. Bill, final thoughts.
Thank you. I'm fairly certain that most people on this call today have heard me say this, and I will repeat it. We can have the greatest plan. We can have all the funding that we possibly need to solve for this. But if the community does not say, yes, I want the people out from under the bridge, out of the parks and green spaces, and in safer reasonable housing shelter solutions. But don't put them here. We will never get there. The community can't have it both ways. As a community, we must start saying yes to solutions. We, however, on this call, all have a responsibility to ensure that whatever we do is well managed and does not blight any location where we might have shelter or services, housing for people who are formerly homeless. Mayor Pro Tem Harper Madison put it so beautifully in relation to a recent hotel purchase, saying, once these people are housed, they're no longer homeless. They're our neighbors. We as a community must say yes to solutions. We can't have it both ways. We don't want them here, but don't put anything near us. We've got to be saying yes, and the community needs to understand that, or we will never make progress regardless of the resources or the plans that we have.
Thanks, Bill. Matt, final words.
Yeah, I think mine is, really one word right now, which is action. I mean, that we're seeing an unprecedented amount of resources come into this community from the federal government. We have commitment and buy-in from our philanthropic community, everybody at the table. The time is now. Action is needed. We need to address people's unsheltered situations. Each day that passes is another day we have people on the streets, and I think action is needed. And my hope is that, and what I know is that all the work that's been done to bring these plans together will lead to action, and action is what it's all about right now.
Okay, and Chris Harris, I see that you're on the phone, and I don't think that you've had a chance to hear this entire conversation. So I want to be fair about asking you a question. But what we will do is give you the recording, and you guys, please continue asking questions. We want to get you out of here on time because we know your time is valuable. So thank you, panelists. And Lynn, I'm going to turn it back over to you with a let me do this. Huge thank you to Mandy Chapman and to Clutch. You guys have done beautiful work for this community. I know it's been hard and complicated, and I just want to thank you for that. And Lynn, also, I know that we've asked for an enormous amount of your time, and I would just want to say thanks for that.
Thank you, Laura. Your summary was excellent. And this time that I have spent on the summit work has been some of the best work of my life. So I thank you for that opportunity, all of you. Panelists, your honesty and your direct answers were incredible. And I think this conversation is important for our community at large to hear. And to our community audience, I thank you for sharing your concerns and your questions. Mandy, what a dynamic presentation. You and your team have looked into the soul of our community, and you have found ways that we can reach our goal. Your understanding, your expertise, your ability to speak to these complex issues will go a long way in helping us solve this issue. We have lots of work to do, and we will continue to work, focusing on the strategies and building out a dynamic plan. But my question for the community, for the audience that is sitting, and for the audience in the community that will view this recording, can you get behind this vision and join together with all of us to drive to the success of this strategy that is addressing our unsheltered citizens' plight today? The time is now, and for the first time, we are sitting together as a broad coalition of leaders. Now is the moment, because we have the attention of the community. I don't know about you, but every conversation I'm in Austin, Texas, whether on a Zoom or on a call, or when I see people out and about, is what are we doing? So we have the attention of the community. It's also the moment, as you've heard a lot about, is that we have incoming federal funds through the American Rescue Plan. And these funds will be deployed It's a once in a lifetime opportunity to change outcomes in our city. And we must use those funds strategically. The human crisis of unsheltered people in Austin is what is calling us to action. It's unacceptable. And although we see a lot of unsheltered people, our numbers right now are at a place where we can scale our system to resolve for homelessness. The strategy that Mandy has presented, which we will deploy in 2021, will get us to our goal. But the question right now for all of us is, can we count on you to lock arms with us, to build the system out, to help us find the additional investments that we will need to achieve our goal? It's the moment right now. We have done very hard things in our community in the almost 30 years that I have lived here. And I know we can do this too. I ask you to join with us. I ask you to get behind these initiatives and help us resolve homelessness for our unsheltered population in Austin. I am so grateful for your time and your support. And Austin's an amazing city. Let's get this done. Let's seize the moment. Thank you and have a wonderful rest of the day. And I look forward to working with you.